It's over, Ethan. My new boyfriend is taking me to Paris. That was the sentence that sliced through the air like a blade. We were sitting in the corner booth of Le Mirage, our favorite restaurant, or at least it used to be. The irony wasn't lost on me. She chose this place deliberately. I could tell by the way her lips curled as she said it, savoring every syllable like a final act of dominance. Her name was Claire. We'd been together for 2 years, built a quiet rhythm of life, morning coffees, shared playlists, and silent glances that used to mean something. And yet, in that moment, she looked like a stranger rehearsing lines for a scene she'd been waiting to perform. I didn't interrupt. I just stirred my drink, letting her speech unfold. She told me she'd outgrown me, that she needed someone more ambitious, someone who made her feel alive again. The words were so textbook that I almost laughed. Then came the real dagger. He's taking me to Paris for a week. First class. We leave Friday. She said it with the kind of cruel confidence that begged for a reaction. I gave her none, because as she described him, this charming, successful man named Lucas, something clicked. I knew that name. He wasn't some stranger sweeping her off her feet. He was my intern, you see. I'm the operations director at a high-end fragrance company in New York, Maison Argent. 3 months ago, we brought in a group of MBA interns to shadow our executives. Lucas was brilliant, magnetic, and reckless. The kind of man who believed charm could get him through any locked door. I saw his potential, but I also saw danger in his eyes, a hunger to win no matter who paid the price. Because of his performance, I approved something unusual, a corporate card. It was meant strictly for project-related expenses, international travel for fragrance expos, client dinners, production samples. The limit was generous, and the oversight mine. I wanted to see if he could handle responsibility. Turns out he couldn't. That night, after Claire stormed out, satisfied with her grand performance, I sat alone at the table, her half-empty glass of wine still trembling. My emotions weren't rage or heartbreak. They were focus. I felt that cold, precise clarity that hits just before a critical deal closes. As soon as I reached my apartment, I logged into the company's expense dashboard, and there it was, the trail of his stupidity. 2 first-class tickets to Paris, a week booked at the hotel, Du Louvre, a $9,000 stay, dinner reservations at Michelin restaurants, all charged to Maison Argent's account. My jaw didn't drop. I simply leaned back, watching his downfall print itself in real time. He thought he was clever, using company money to impress my girlfriend, betting that I wouldn't notice until he was sipping champagne under the Eiffel Tower. When Claire came back later that night to collect her things, she paused at the door. She wanted to twist the knife one last time. "Well, Ethan," she said, "I guess this is goodbye. Paris awaits." I looked at her, expressionless. "Enjoy your flight," I replied. That was the last time I spoke to her face to face. For the next few days, I played my part. I acted like nothing had happened, even replying politely to Lucas's work emails. Meanwhile, I monitored every charge he made. Airport lounge fees, last-minute purchases, champagne at JFK. Every transaction told me a story. His arrogance had no brakes. On Friday evening, I sat in my apartment, the faint scent of sandalwood from my office samples still lingering in the air. I opened the flight tracker website. Air France, Flight 023. Their status changed from boarding to in air. I waited until that tiny airplane icon drifted past the Atlantic coast, unreachable. Then I opened my phone. A single pre-written message waited in drafts. Lucas, this message is to inform you that your internship with Mason Argent is terminated, effective immediately. Your corporate card has been cancelled. Do not attempt to contact me or any employee at the firm. A formal notice will follow. I hit send. Then I made a call to the company's finance department. As the authorizing director, I requested the card be locked and the charges marked as fraudulent. Within minutes, the corporate lifeline he was dangling from turned into dust. I leaned back and exhaled. Somewhere high above the Atlantic, two people were toasting to a dream built on borrowed money. They didn't know it yet, but by the time they landed, their Parisian fantasy would dissolve into panic. I wasn't seeking revenge. Not yet. This was about control, the kind I'd earned, the kind they had underestimated. And I knew when their plane touched down, reality would hit harder than anything I could ever say. The fragrance of poetic justice was already in the air. I imagined the exact moment their fairy tale began to crack. Claire, in her flowy cream dress, oversized sunglasses, and that smug little smile, would step off the plane first. Lucas, right behind her, confident as ever, his arm around her waist. They'd walk through the terminal, chattering about croissants and candlelit dinners. The air would smell like roasted coffee and jet fuel. They'd take a cab to their 5-star hotel, the kind with chandeliers and gold-plated elevators. Then, at the front desk, the moment would arrive, the beginning of their descent. G Suisse. Monsieur, the receptionist would say, eyes flicking from the computer screen to their faces. The card used to book this room has been declined. I could picture it vividly. Claire's confused frown turning into panic. Lucas, fumbling for excuses. The way her voice would sharpen. What do you mean, declined? Try again. But the concierge would stay calm, polite, practiced. No card, no room. Their dream trip would unravel one layer at a time. No check-in. No dinner reservation. No backup plan. And worse, no money. Lucas's intern salary barely covered rent back in New York, and Claire. She'd quit her retail job 2 weeks before. Confident her upgrade in life made it unnecessary at 3 a.m. Paris time. While they were likely pacing outside the hotel in the drizzle, my phone lit up. A call from a French number. I let it ring out. Then again. Then came the texts. Ethan, what did you do? The hotel says the card's invalid. Lucas just found out he's been fired. This isn't funny, we're stranded. Please, just fix this. You owe me this much. Owe her. The word almost made me laugh. The entitlement was staggering. I read her messages slowly, letting each one wash over me like music. For years, she'd manipulated every emotion I had, using tears, silence, guilt. But now, there was nothing left to weaponize. Her power was gone, so I typed back one single sentence. This sounds like a personal issue between you and your new man. As I said before, enjoy your flight. I hit send, then blocked her number. One swipe and she vanished from my digital life, like a perfume fading into the air. Once intoxicating, now just residue. But the world is never short on gossip. Within hours, messages from mutual friends trickled in. Ethan, this isn't right. They're stuck with no money. Claire says you set them up. You have to help her. She's terrified. I didn't reply to any of them. I simply hit block, one name after another. This wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. By Monday morning, I was back in my office at Mason Argent, reviewing budgets under the soft hum of a diffuser spreading bergamot and cedarwood. My assistant walked in, handing me a report from HR. "We heard about the incident with the intern," she said cautiously. "The board wants to review it." "Good," I replied. "I have the documents ready." That afternoon, I met with HR and our chief executive. I showed them the expense reports, the fraudulent charges, the times. Every transaction had a trail, and that trail told a perfect story. An intern who abused company trust, and a superior who acted decisively to protect the firm. My boss nodded. "You did the right thing, Ethan. Fast, clean, and by the book. We'll flag his name across all partner firms. He won't work in this industry again." I gave a small, controlled smile. That's exactly what I intended. Inside, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not joy, not vengeance, just equilibrium. The scales were balanced again. Claire and Lucas had chosen greed over decency, arrogance over honesty. And in a world as precise as ours, where even one wrong ingredient can ruin a fragrance, they had mixed all the wrong notes. As I left the meeting, sunlight streamed through the glass atrium. The city buzzed below, unaware of the tiny storm that had just been contained. My reflection in the elevator mirrored a man who wasn't broken, only sharper. Revenge wasn't the goal. Control was, and now I had it back entirely. Still, part of me couldn't help wondering how long it would take before I heard the next chapter of their Parisian disaster. I didn't have to wait long. A week later, the whispers began. Not through Claire, she'd gone silent, but through the grapevine that winds its way through every city office and social circle. A friend of a friend mentioned it at a company lunch. "Did you hear about that intern? The one who got stranded in Paris?" I kept my expression neutral, my fork hovering over a plate of grilled salmon. "Can't say I have," I said calmly, but inside I already knew. The story, as it reached me, was better than I could have scripted. After the hotel refused their booking, Lucas and Claire spent their first night sitting in the lobby, pretending they were waiting for someone. By dawn, they were asked to leave. With the corporate card frozen, Lucas tried his personal debit. It declined immediately. They scrambled through ATMs, called their banks, but every route ended the same. No funds available. Eventually, Claire broke. She called her parents, sobbing in the middle of Boulevard Haussmann. She told them she'd been misled, that she didn't know Lucas had used stolen company money. I imagine her father's voice, cold and disappointed, cutting through the tears. "You left your boyfriend for a thief." It took hours of pleading before they agreed to wire enough for 2 one-way economy tickets home. No Paris romance. No 5-star dinners. Just 2 miserable seats near the airplane restroom, with a layover in Iceland and silence heavy enough to crush them both. They landed back in New York 2 days later, humiliated. Lucas's internship was officially terminated, and my company's legal department had already issued a formal repayment demand for every cent spent, over $25,000, when he failed to respond within the 30-day deadline. The matter was escalated to legal action, and, as protocol demanded, our HR department informed his business school. His expulsion was swift. Professionally, he was finished. No reputable fragrance house or luxury brand would ever touch him again. In a world built on image, reputation is everything, and his had collapsed like a cheap knockoff scent that fades before you leave the store. Claire didn't fare better. She returned to an empty apartment, my apartment, which she no longer had any claim to. She tried to fight back. I received a long, self-righteous email filled with pseudo-legal jargon about emotional damages and shared property. She even attached a list of items she wanted returned: artwork, a leather sofa, even the espresso machine, all of which I had bought long before she'd moved in. I didn't bother replying. I simply forwarded the email to my attorney. Within a day, a sharp, surgically precise cease and desist letter was sent to her inbox. It detailed every factual inaccuracy in her claims, attached receipts proving my ownership, and included one particularly chilling paragraph, the kind that makes the blood drain from a person's face. It stated that she had knowingly participated in an international trip funded by fraudulent corporate assets, that while the company was only pursuing Lucas, her involvement made her a potential accessory should further contact or defamation continue. The letter concluded politely: "We advise you to refrain from further communication. Consider this your final notice." Silence followed. Absolute, beautiful silence. But gossip thrives where pride has been wounded. Soon, I started hearing from mutual acquaintances that Claire was trying to rewrite history. She told people I was a control freak, that I'd orchestrated the whole firing out of jealousy. I didn't respond, didn't correct her. I didn't need to. Truth has a scent of its own. It lingers long after lies fade away. One evening, about a month later, I was leaving the office when I caught a familiar perfume in the lobby, the faint sweetness of jasmine and bergamot. For a split second, my body stiffened. Then I saw her, Claire, dressed plainly, hair tied back, a shadow of her former self. She froze when our eyes met. The confidence, the defiance, the glow of superiority gone. "Ethan," she whispered, "can we talk?" I glanced at my watch, then back at her. "There's nothing left to say." She tried to smile, but her voice cracked. "You ruined everything." I gave a slow nod. "No, Claire. You did." I walked past her, leaving behind that faint cloud of perfume, once intoxicating, now just a ghost. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer. I thought about justice, how sometimes it doesn't come in grand gestures, but in quiet, methodical choices. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I hadn't even sought revenge. I had simply removed my trust, and without it, their entire world collapsed. And for the first time in a long while, I slept without dreams. Months passed. The whole ordeal became something distant, like a bad fragrance that had finally faded from the air. I'd gone back to work, buried myself in new projects, rediscovered parts of my life that had nothing to do with her. But life has a strange sense of timing. Just when you think you've turned the last page, it throws a folded note back at you, one you thought you'd already burned. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning. My assistant, Maya, knocked gently and entered my office holding an envelope. "This came for you," she said, a curious look in her eyes. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I knew too well, the delicate loops, the confident slant. "Claire," I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no perfume this time. The message was short. "You were right about everything. I thought I could replace you, but I only replaced the truth. I'm moving away, somewhere small, somewhere quiet. Don't worry. You'll never hear from me again. See." I stared at the words for a long time. There was no anger left in me, no satisfaction either. Just a faint melancholy, not for her, but for the version of myself that once believed love could fix selfishness. That weekend, I decided to drive out of the city. I needed space, real space. The kind where the air smells like rain and not ambition. I ended up in a small coastal town 3 hours north, a place where time seemed to slow down. I booked a tiny cabin by the water and spent my evenings walking along the beach, letting the tide erase my footsteps. It was there, one night under a bleeding orange sunset, that I finally realized something simple yet powerful. Closure doesn't come when they apologize. It comes when you stop needing one. Back in New York, things began to align again. My fragrance project, the one I'd been developing before everything fell apart, finally launched. We called it Noir Bloom. Ironically, it was inspired by duality, how something dark could still be beautiful. The campaign tagline read, "Some scars don't fade, they evolve." It became one of our best sellers. Critics called it a scent that smells like memory, both painful and intoxicating. And one evening, at a private launch dinner, a journalist asked me, "Is it true the perfume was inspired by a heartbreak?" I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "It was inspired by the moment after." She nodded thoughtfully, jotting it down, not realizing that somewhere in that answer was everything. The betrayal, the silence, the rebuilding. As the night went on, laughter and music filled the room. I looked around at the faces, friends, colleagues, new beginnings, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that's quiet, but the kind that's earned. I didn't think about Claire again for months, until one afternoon, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media, I saw her name tagged in a photo. She was in Lisbon, smiling, standing beside a small art exhibit. No designer dresses, no champagne, just sunlight and color and maybe, finally, humility. I didn't click her profile. I didn't need to. I just scrolled past, set my phone down, and looked out the window where the city glowed gold in the setting sun. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't justice or karma. It's becoming untouchable, not out of pride, but out of peace. And as I leaned back, the faint scent of Noir Bloom lingered in the air. Bittersweet, grounding, and finally, mine. I never thought silence could be so loud. When Ethan walked past me in that lobby, eyes steady, expression unreadable, it was like watching the last bridge burn without smoke or fire. Just quiet, absolute finality. The weeks that followed were a blur of panic and denial. I tried to convince myself he'd overreacted, that I could fix things with the right apology, the right explanation. But when the legal letter came, cold and precise, I realized this wasn't a heartbreak. It was a verdict. Lucas disappeared soon after. He stopped answering my calls, blocked me on everything. I later learned he'd fled to another city, trying to rebuild under a fake name. That was when it hit me. I wasn't betrayed by one man. I'd betrayed myself. The world that once felt luxurious now felt hollow. Every designer piece, every glass of champagne, every Instagram filter, it all looked cheap under the harsh light of consequence. I sold most of my things, moved out of the apartment, and took a job at a small art gallery in a quiet part of Lisbon. Some days, I still catch the scent of jasmine and bergamot. The perfume, Ethan once said, smelled like confidence and danger. I wear it less now. Sometimes not at all. It reminds me too much of who I used to be. The girl who thought love was something you could win with attention, admiration, and glittering nights now. I spend my days surrounded by paintings, messy, imperfect, beautiful. I've learned to appreciate the strokes that don't blend, the cracks in the canvas. Maybe that's what we were, a painting ruined not by lack of color, but by too much ego in the artist's hand. One evening, while closing the gallery, a couple walked in. They were laughing, holding hands, teasing each other over which painting to buy. The man had that quiet confidence, not loud, not performative. For a moment, I thought of Ethan, but instead of pain, I felt gratitude, because without losing him, I'd never have found this version of me, the one who doesn't need to be adored to feel worthy. Before they left, the woman asked, "Do you make art too?" I smiled softly. "Not yet," I said, "but I think I'm learning how." When I got home that night, I opened my drawer and found that old letter I'd sent him months ago, the one that simply said, "You were right about everything." I added one more line underneath, "And thank you for letting me fall. It's the only way I learned to stand." Then I folded it, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it away. Not as a regret, as a reminder, because sometimes the end of a love story isn't tragedy, it's transformation. And in the quiet corners of my new life, beneath Lisbon's fading sunsets, I finally learned to breathe again, not as the woman he lost, but as the woman I became.